It is Senior Bowl week, and it's now time to break down the 8 Senior Bowl quarterbacks. Mike, let's discuss what we're looking for, who's actually down there, and if you're a QB-needy team, the guys you need to keep an eye on. Let's start on the South team, where I think the big name here is Will Grier, West Virginia quarterback. I don't know if the rest of maybe the NFL is as excited about Grier maybe as we are. He did grade extremely well in our system, and I think of all the quarterbacks down here, he should be the best to come out of this game in Mobile.
Yeah, I think he should end up being the top performer of the week throughout the one-on-one gradings and throughout the game grades. But I do think that he's not necessarily the guy who's going to make himself a ton of money. You know, he's not going to be shooting up boards, because that's just not sort of the type of player he is. He has a strong arm, but not an elite caliber arm. He's not going to really wow guys with that. And I think he's put enough on tape at this point to know who he is. So he can, as long as he doesn't really screw up, I think he'll be, in that sort of conversation for the first couple rounds.
Yeah, one of the things with Grier, so many of his big-time throws, and he had 33 of them that tied for the national lead. So many of them were just deep balls and, go balls, touch throws down the field. He does that extremely well. I want to see him throwing at the intermediate level, those NFL-type throws, which I do think he's capable of, and I think this is a good place for him to at least show that.
And I think the other biggest thing that he can't really prove this week was his pocket presence wasn't great at West Virginia. He was the top 10 nationwide in terms of converting pressure to sacks, took a lot of sacks there. You can't really do that when you're not getting sacked. So that's one of the things he can't really prove there at the Senior Bowl.
Right, not in practice as much, perhaps, in the limited game action. Let's go through the rest of his teammates on the South. We have Jarrett Stidham from Auburn, a guy who initially started at Baylor. He goes to Auburn, and he's got first-round size and arm strength, but he never really played like a first-round pick, and I think, a little disappointing from a production standpoint.
Yeah, I think it'll help him in terms of he gets to go to more NFL sort of looks there at the Senior Bowl as opposed to what they ran at Auburn. But at the same time, if you look at his stats, you look at all the advanced stats that we have on him, he had one of the highest percentages of his yards come after the catch of anyone. He didn't even have that many yards this past year. Over 60% of his yards came after the catch. That was higher than anyone else at the Senior Bowl. Second highest of any Power 5 quarterback nationwide. He just was sort of in a simplistic offense and still not incredibly accurate, still not putting up great numbers.
Yeah, very screen-heavy attack at Auburn, and when he was at Baylor, it was pretty much all just go balls and screens. So watching him in this NFL-style offense is important as well. We'll see, because he does have pretty good zip on the ball, and he could be the guy that at least wows some scouts, even if that component's a little overrated, I think, this week. The other guy that will wow scouts, just from a size standpoint, Tyree Jackson. And even though I'm 6'10", I think the size thing's a little overrated, but he's about 6'7", 250.
He's no you,
I mean, he's not as athletic, as 6'10", 280 over here. But, with Jackson, he's got some things to iron out, because he's got some spectacular plays on tape. A lot of them are outside the pocket. I think we're saying a lot of the same things about Jackson that we said about Josh Allen last year, but definitely a tick below where Josh Allen was.
I was going to say, they're even more exacerbated than they were with Josh Allen. He had the third worst adjusted completion percentage, in all the FBS last season. He's just inaccurate, and wildly inaccurate at that, and that's just not going to get it done at the NFL level.
All right, so very simple on Tyree Jackson.
Tyree.
But we want to see him, playing within structure, the short and intermediate passing game. Is that accuracy? Is that timing there? Also had 19 turnover-worthy throws. Far too many. And then the last player on the South team, it's Gardner Minshew, kind of the opposite of Tyree Jackson. A little bit shorter, more of a distributor, coming from a scheme where it wasn't necessarily about spectacular plays. It was the short passing game at Washington State that Minshew ran extremely well.
Hey, he was fantastic in terms of running Mike Leach's offense, but it's not an offense that really is going to translate in terms of he's not making a lot of NFL throws. So many checkdowns, so many underneath passes. His average depth of target was only 6.6 yards. That's Alex Smith-esque territory. You're just not going to a lot of NFL teams are not going to want that in their system. You want a downfield passer. You want to see what he can do down the field, just because he really didn't do it at Washington State. But he doesn't have a big arm. He's not going to wow or anything. But if he's accurate on those throws, could move him up some boards.
Want to see him working through progressions too. Sometimes, again, the air raid stuff is a little bit more simplistic. They do work through progressions, but it's a little different style than the NFL. And now to the north side, this is an interesting group of quarterbacks, starting with Drew Locke from Missouri, a guy that's a couple guys that are getting first-round hype, but Drew Locke, certainly one of them, has the size, has the arm strength. What are we looking for from Locke this week?
Yeah, I think he has the most money to make of any of the quarterbacks here because of what you mentioned. He has the arm strength, and he can put it into tight windows when he wants to. Had the most big-time throws of any quarterback in college football this season with 33. That was tied with Will Grier, actually. But I do want to see the accuracy, consistency with the accuracy, because he just has some ugly throws on tape. And the other thing I wanted him to prove was pocket presence, sort of like Will Grier. Can't really prove that this week, so that's why without the pocket presence being there, with the zip on his throws, if he's accurate with them, he'll move up some boards.
Yeah, the pocket thing is interesting because of his footwork. He makes some plays, off balance, where his feet aren't under him, but he does it sometimes when he needs to and sometimes when he doesn't, and that's where a lot of the inconsistency comes from. Another guy coming from this very college-y type of offense where it's a lot of downfield throwing and not a ton of NFL type reads, so watching that this week will be key. The other guy that is getting a ton of first-round hype is Daniel Jones from Duke. And I think the big thing for him, if you look at his PFF career grades, 65.7, 61.8, not that great for a couple of years, and then this year, 82.2, good, not great.
Still not that great, but
right.
Yeah.
But he's improved,
Yes,
and he's 6'5", 220, and he's the whole NFL size and arm and all that fun stuff. What are we looking for with Jones this week?
Yeah, I think consistency. You look at the grading, that's still not elite level grading, that's still not playing at a super high level, was not a terribly accurate quarterback. Obviously looks the part, that's gonna turn heads anytime a guy's 6'5", 220, and you can just plug and play pocket passer like that. But I don't think he's that plug and play. I don't think he's that NFL ready. He just doesn't really do anything that necessarily excites me on tape.
And when I watch Jones, I get a lot of Nick Foles type of vibes, both good and bad. I think he can do some good things actually, throwing the ball under pressure. He takes big hits. He's willing to do that, but he also has some of the same inconsistency that has plagued Foles' career. So we'll see the more I watch him if I stick with that comparison. The other quarterback to watch here, Ryan Finley from NC State. To me, he's a guy that was very good in college, a very good college quarterback, but every time he played against better competition, namely Clemson, his arm strength issues would kind of show up, especially at the intermediate level. So that's what I'm going to be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I was going to say, we often talk about how arm strength's not nearly as important as accuracy, but to me it's more of a threshold, and he might not necessarily meet that threshold. He just struggles with pushing the ball downfield, and it's almost more obvious with the offense he played in at NC State, because he had one of the most yards in the air percentages of any quarterback in the country. He didn't have a ton of yards after catch because he's run a lot of deep comebacks, a lot of deep intermediate to stuff that he's running in that NC State offense. So a lot of it was pushing the ball downfield, and that's like you mentioned. Against Clemson, those balls just floated. Those balls got tipped. Those balls got picked. And so when we did face better competition, it really showed up.
Yeah, right. That downfield throwing was a lot better against lesser competition for Finley. Let's see how that arm strength and that zip matches up against some of these other guys. And then the last guy on the North team, it's Trace McSorley from Penn State. He's that guy, we said he's a gamer, and he had so many games that were just ugly, right? I mean, he'd miss some throws, and then before you know it, he's rushed for 110. He did that a bunch this past year, but he's had a pretty good career at Penn State, made some big throws when he needed to. But the thing that stood out to me on tape is there's so many, I like to call them YOLO balls, but downfield jump balls where he's having his receivers go up and make plays.
Yeah, truthfully, he's probably the least likely guy to be. He didn't necessarily belong at Senior Bowl with the rest of these guys. I don't see much of an NFL future just in terms of the throws he made at Penn State, the consistency. Like you mentioned, just so many YOLO balls, so many off-target throws. He won more games because of his legs and that sort of thing, because of the big plays that his wide receivers made for him than really what he did. So I'm not necessarily sure there's any sort of ceiling here for his performance this week.
Keep an eye on McSorley's accuracy. He had the lowest accuracy percentage of any of the 8 quarterbacks here, below even Tyree Jackson, who, as we mentioned earlier, had the 3rd worst adjusted completion percentage. So slightly different numbers, but as far as ball location goes, McSorley was the worst out of the 8. So there you go. It's the 8 quarterbacks to watch here at the Senior Bowl. Keep an eye on them during practice and during the game, and stick with us as we continue our Senior Bowl coverage.